Details of what it requires from a company to do. Now, even if I'm in food safety for so many years, there's always, opportunities for learning, which what I learned today is, where's John? He's gone? Oh. What I learned today, which is very, very good news, is that the FSVP is basically evolving like the seafood HACCP.
Yes.
So if it's going that direction, then we have hope for clarity, because the seafood HACCP has a beautiful guide which tells you exactly what the hazards are. And if it goes that direction, we're going to be fine. So that's a good part. A little bit about myself. I've been dealing with food for 43 years. At first I started with eating it, but then slowly I got on to working with it. And I've been in manufacturing, I've been in recipe formulations, and slowly it evolved, as everything does, into the food safety sector. So I've been quality assurance for a manufacturing plant, and then I started doing the consulting for other manufacturers, importers, and anybody dealing with food. We take care of any needs in the food industry regarding safety and quality. I'm sure if you're here, you've had a run-in or two with one of those regulations or one of those acronyms, which are, it's a little bit unclear, but he had a very good cartoon in them, in one of his with the FISMA and the PCQI and the SQF and all those acronyms, like, is this English? But yeah, once we get into it, we learn about it. So just a little bit about FISMA itself. Now, FSVP is one part of the Food Safety Modernization Act. The Food Safety Modernization Act encompasses a very wide variety of rules that went into effect slowly. It had a staggered implementation date, but it involves several rules, which includes, we're just going to quickly go over them, which includes the preventive control for human food, which anybody handling, holding, distributing, importing, packing, or anything you do with human foods is involved under the preventive control for human foods rule. We have the preventive control for animal foods. Up until FISMA, I know that a lot of corrective actions for human foods was divert to animal use. At this point, we can't do that anymore, because the animals are treated exactly the same as humans, and we cannot give anything that's not fit for human consumption to the animals. So things have changed a lot with the animal feed and food, pet food and everything. We've heard actually a lot of pet food recalls in the last half a year, a lot of them. The next one is sanitary transportation of human and animal foods. This is applicable to anybody that transports the food. In transportation, now in importing, I don't know who it's on, if it's the transporting company, the importer, or the supplier that has to make sure that the transportation is done in a sanitary way, that temperature is controlled, it's clean, there's no backhauling or anything of that. And many of these rules apply to, like, if you're a manufacturer, you could be subject to several of these rules. It's not like, okay, my PC plan is okay and I'm done. We have to go through everything to see what is applicable to us, what do I have to comply with. Then we have the produce safety rule, the intentional adulteration, which is actually coming up now, I think July 26, where it has to be implemented. And then we have the audit, the auditor certification, which they have to comply with. So the last one, that we're going to discuss and what we're going into is the FSVP program, the Foreign Supplier Verification Program. But in reality, even if this is all foreign supplier verification, with the PC rule, with the preventive control for human foods, we have to approve all of our suppliers, whether they're United States or they're foreign. So what I want to bring to you is that, yes, we're looking for imported foods, and we're doing the FSVP program, but what we're trying to control here and to get a grip on is all our suppliers, whether they're domestic, whether they're foreign, whatever it is, we need to know that we are getting safe food. And to take care of that is a whole huge big thing, in the office. So this is what we're here for today, to let you know what it is and to give you the solution of how we could take care of that. So first of all, FSMA is the first major overhaul. He went into the legal aspect. I'm just going to go very quickly. FSMA is the first major overhaul since the 1930s when things came into, when food law started coming into effect. It was signed into law in 2011. FDA issued the proposed rules, so they give time for FDA to come up with the rules. And then when they come up with the rules, they proposed the rule in 2013. In 2015, it started rolling out. It started, coming into effect. And I think, the final rule was September 2015 for the preventive control, November 2015 for the FSVP. There is staggered compliance date because first it's teaching and then it's, implementing and everything. Now I just want to tell you one part is that, like he mentioned, the FDA inspectors are taking the same courses as you are. So they have the same knowledge as you have and they have the same questions as you have. But you are in a better place because you're actually working with the food and they are just inspecting. So when they come in, if you are well versed in the law, you know what you're doing, you know what you're saying, you haven't worked out very, very well, they're never going to question you at this point. They're not going to question you. They see you have your papers, you have everything straight, you know the rule, you're well informed, you're probably good. Eventually, as he says, it's going to evolve into going into the nitty-gritty details, but as of now, you should be well aware. If somebody comes into you and asks you, do you have this document, and say, then they would question the whole program. If you say, of course I have it, this is what I have, this is what we're doing, this is how we're this is how we're verifying, they see the sequence of events. So now the FSMA gave a significant increase in power to the FDA. They could do mandatory recalls, and also with imports. Until now, they needed credible evidence, and now they could have reason to believe. So until now, they needed evidence to refuse something, and now it's just reason to believe. If I believe that it might be a hazard, it's also, no good. What FSMA did, and this is very important to understand, is they went from reaction to prevention. Until now, the entire food safety system was focusing on reaction. So it started out, for example, in 1989, one of the newspapers wrote that there was chemicals and garbage backhauls in trucks that delivered food. So this was terrible. People were starting to get scared. Our food is contaminated. Okay, so what does the FDA do? Enactment of the Sanitary Food Transportation Act of 1990. This was under the Department of Transportation. In 1993, everybody knows about the Jack in the Box E. coli outbreak. What happened? Mandatory HACCP for the meat industry. We continue, 1994, another transportation problem. Ice cream was transferred in the same truck, in the same tanker that carried unpasteurized eggs. 224,000 people had salmonellosis. What happened? They saw that, there's no oversight. They transferred from the Department of Transportation to the FDA that they should create, and this led to the FDA, the Sanitary Food Transportation Act of 2005. So like this, it was evolving, and everything was created as a reaction to an outbreak. In 1995, salmonella in citrus juice. 1996, E. coli in apple juice. And every time there's a death, and every time there's a lot of sickness, a lot of hospitalizations, the monetary loss, the value of the outbreak and of the hospitalizations and the loss of work is huge. So they came out with a mandatory implementation of the juice HACCP. So like this, it went. What FSMA did was they took away reacting to it. They want to prevent. What in the world could go wrong with my product that I should be able to prevent, that nothing should happen with it? And we all, as manufacturers, as importers, as anybody working with food, have to understand that we are not doing this for the FDA. We're doing this for ourselves. We're doing this to protect our food, to protect our brand, to be able to sleep well at night. When I was in manufacturing and I knew that something was missing or something wasn't sanitized well, something, I said, my goodness, how could we produce food in there and then sell it to the world? There are kids eating the food, there are seniors eating the food, there are immunocompromised people eating the food. We really have, as manufacturers, handlers, and everything, we have to be careful. It's on us to be very, very careful to make sure that our food meets the requirements. It's not the FDA. I went into one of the manufacturers that I worked with and said, get me the FDA things, whatever they want, get it done for me. I said, I'm not getting done anything for the FDA. I'm implementing a food safety plan for you, because this is what you need and this is what you have to focus on to have safe food. Okay, so now the FSVP rule, John went through, a lot of it. What we have to make sure is that our suppliers have the same safety standards, equivalent safety standards as the United States, and we have to make sure that the food is not adulterated, misbranded, like allergens, it's labeled correctly, and it could be brought into the United States and meets the legal requirements in here. Now, imported foods, I found this very interesting. The value of imported food right now is at $137 trillion. It's only 50% of our food supply, which is interesting. But we import a lot of food. There's a lot of imports. There's no way the FDA could test and sample all these imports, things pass through the cracks and everything. So really it is our responsibility as importers to make sure that we're taking from verified sources. It's growing a lot, and what's interesting to see is that the biggest one is the produce industry. Fruits, vegetables, and nuts, that's the biggest increase in imports. Now, the FSVP requirements, and we'll go into each one as it is supposed to be in our office. Now, you spoke from the FDA regulation guide, what they'll be looking for. I'm going to talk of what we have to do on a daily basis to have it. So basically, we need a qualified person to perform the following. Now, what is a qualified person? Now, the FDA describes a qualified person as someone who has either taken the course by, I think, the FSPCA, they do the course, or that has business experience and understands what it takes. So it's not really defined. It's very helpful in taking the course, but if you have a lot of business experience and you could learn by yourself and you read through the guidance documents and you get somebody to help you out, you also become a qualified individual. But that's a little bit difficult to say for FSVP, because I could be if I'm producing yogurt, I could be qualified through business experience to realize or to know what the hazards in yogurt are. But I would not be qualified to know what the hazards in one of the ingredients is. Like if I do blueberries in my yogurt and I have to now find all the hazards of the blueberry jam, I wouldn't know that. So a qualified individual is a little bit, you have to know what you're doing. Take the course, or get a consultant to do it for you, to get the hazards for you for the products that you are not qualified in. So again, you might be qualified for the product you're producing, but you might not be qualified for any, for the products you're importing. Now, what we have to perform is like this. You have to do the hazard analysis. You went in a little bit with that, but we'll go into more depth. We have to evaluate the foreign supplier. We have to do supplier verification activities, corrective actions, periodic reassessment of the FSVP, importer identification at entry. That's what he discussed. Who is the importer? Who is the person that is responsible to make sure that your supplier is verified, and record keeping. Okay, so conducting a hazard analysis to determine known or reasonably foreseeable hazards with each food that requires a control. So now we have to look at the product. Is the imported product subject to FSVP regulations? That's first. Seafood is not. There are some exemptions. The juice, they have other regulations. Low acid canned foods, they have modified exemptions. So we have to look at the chemical and physical, but we don't have to look at the biological hazards. So first we have to take the product and see what are the requirements for this exact product. Once we know the requirements, we continue. What are the risks associated with the product itself? The physical, chemical, biological, and radiological is what FISMA added to the hazards. What are the risks associated with its production? You know, is it produced? Where is it produced? How is it produced? All of those. Then we have what controls can be implemented to reduce or eliminate those risks. Now, the first thing I want to go before I explain this is these are products that are exempt from FSVP. So firms that are subject to juice or seafood hazard regulations, food for research or evaluation, alcoholic beverages and ingredients, the ingredients when the importer uses it to make an alcoholic beverage, foods transshipped through the U.S., food imported for processing and export, that means I import it, I process it, and I export it right away to the different country. U.S. foods returned, foods that were produced here, sent out for packaging or whatever reason, and returned. Meat, poultry, and egg products subject to USDA regulations at time of importation. I believe that catfish also falls into that category right now. So these are the regulations. Now, going back to the hazard analysis, it is very difficult to do a hazard analysis when you have no clue about the process that this product is going through. So what you could do is, even before you start your whole thing, try to get the hazard analysis from your supplier. Review that hazard analysis, see if it covers all controls that you could think of. You know, give it to someone to review, see if that covers, and then use this as your hazard analysis. Because sometimes it's very difficult for yourself to create a hazard analysis. You've done it for your own product, but you can't do it for your 175 ingredients that you want. So this would be an easier way. Get the hazard analysis from your supplier, review it if it makes sense, see if they're controlling all the hazards that you could come up with. There's also the FDA has a potential hazards guide, which is a very, very useful tool. You could go there, get the hazard guide, and they give you all biological, physical, and chemical hazards which might be associated with the specific product. So if you want to go there, FDA Potential Hazards Guide. It's an excellent book, it's excellent brochure, and you get all the hazards there. So it's either you do the hazard analysis, which you're supposed to be doing, or get the hazard analysis from your customer and confirm that that's really covering everything. So then we have the supplier evaluation and verification. Besides evaluating your product, you have to evaluate your supplier. So if you're realizing now, if I get it from a supplier 2 products, I need to do 3 evaluations. So it increases. If you have 20 suppliers with 50 products, you need to do 70 evaluations. And this is a lot of work for a secretary or anybody to be doing, besides the fact that it has to be reviewed, reassessed, reanalyzed. If anything is expired, you have to get it. If anything changes by the supplier, you have to get it. There's a lot of work. And here, it's a little bit, hard to do it in paper or in Excel, or even in Access. We've tried Access. I've tried everything before I met James. I did it in every way possible. I was thinking of even trying to do my own app. Like, how in the world could I get something a little bit automated? Because you could sit days and days and days, and when you're finally done and you're starting to breathe a sigh of relief, reassessment time, and you're at it again. So now about the supplier. Does the supplier have a food safety system in place? What programs do they have in place to support the system? Okay, so yeah, we're sanitizing, we're cleaning. Do you have environmental testing to know that your sanitizing is effective? Do you have any supporting programs to know that everything, calibration programs, to know that the temperature you're monitoring is accurate? All these questions have to be asked to know if the supplier is really doing what he's supposed to. Does this program he has meet the U.S. safety standards? Does the supplier significantly minimize or prevent the identified risks? So we have the hazard analysis. He says that the pickles are packed in glass jars. Does he have a glass policy? Does he have a breakage policy? Is he significantly taking care of the risks that are associated with that product? using the evaluation to approve suppliers and determine appropriate supplier verification activities. So now we take that evaluation of our supplier, the questionnaires, hazard analysis and everything, and now we have to verify and make sure that it's being done, it's being implemented, and the supplier is approved, is ready for approval. And then the reevaluation once in 3 years, or when there are changes. It's at a minimum once in 3 years. If something changes, or if you get a new supplier, or if they change their process, or if they change their location, they move, whatever it is, any change happening, you have to know about it. So verification activities could be several. I know John went into a little bit, but there could be several verification activities that you could do. These verification activities are based on the risk, on the evaluation, and you see if the supplier is risky. According to that risk, you must perform appropriate verification activities. Now, there are several possibilities. You could do annual on-site audits, but annual on-site audits are only for really risky products which have a SOCOTA hazard. Anybody know what SOCOTA is? It's a very... John knows.
Serious adverse health.
Right, I wrote it in tiny. It's serious adverse health, I have to remember it myself, serious adverse health consequences or death to humans or animals.
Absolutely.
So if we evaluate that there's a SOCOTA hazard, a serious adverse effect that could happen if there is no control. Now, if there's a control, we're fine. But if there is no control, could there be a serious adverse effect? For example, very simple one is if something has milk and it doesn't list the allergen. Do they have a labeling procedure? As a matter of fact, unfortunately, we lost a friend last week to a milk allergy, that 14-year-old girl that, ate something, eggs, omelet, and it had milk, and she didn't know about it. But this is a serious issue when an allergen isn't listed. So, do they have a labeling procedure? Do they review it? How often do they review it? How they check? Do you check, as when you receive, if the labeling is correct and if it has everything, does it match the formulation statement, so on and so forth. So this is annual on-site audit. Sampling or testing products. So you could sample or test products if you don't know that they're taking care or controlling all the biological hazards. You could sample it in-house. It's tedious, We rather get a certificate of analysis from a supplier and have them do all the testing, which that could work too. And the third one is review of suppliers' relevant food safety records. So we could take all their records, review it, see that they have everything in place. Best part is if the supplier is GFSI, they have the Global Food Safety Initiative, they send us their BRC or SQF or FSSI or whatever document, and we know that they have to conform to, all these standards. That is amazing. But FSVP does not recognize either BRC or SQF or anything. So you need to get the entire report, go through the hazards, go through everything, and then you have the certificate, which is good backup, but you still have to do all the motions. I think with the verification, John, you would be able to answer that with third-party auditing, which they're gonna certifying bodies. Would we be able to rely on BRC or SQF audits?
So the way that it's being kind of thought through right now is they have to be reviewing, does it provide the same level of assurance as preventive control?
Well,
so BRC and them have been amending their protocols to do that. And I believe BRC has it, and maybe a few of the others have it. It is an addendum that you can pay for.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have worked with clients and others taking the position that it provides the same level and then using that as an assurance.
Mm-hmm. So the question is if it's recognized by them.
Well, so you don't have to have the official under the third-party certification. You don't have to use that. That's only for VPRO. For your FSVP, does it provide the same level? And FDA hasn't fairly said yes or no. And that's one of them to be seen, but a lot of the industry that I've been working with are saying the position is yes, and we'll wait to see what FDA says.
But it's not clear and it's not written. It's not, something. We can't really rely on it yet. So we still have to go through the reviews, and I'm sure when they see that you have your customer's BRC certificate and specification documents and all the other documents, they're going to say, they're good to go, because GFSI is against the codex, and that's what we need. They're a food safety hazard. So that's with the verification activities. Corrective action. So what if something goes wrong? Either import alert, and this is a question also I had to John, if there's an import alert because I don't have a FSVP, so is the import alert against me or against my supplier?
It's against you, but the supplier is noted because of the way it's a computer system.
That's right. So when another importer wants to take from that supplier, does he get a notice that there's an import alert on that supplier?
No, they should be aware of that when they do their own due diligence. I see your list on import alert. Oh, it's the one with that.
So they could just, but they see it, and it's unfortunate for the supplier. So that's a problem, We have to be careful. We have to, have the FSVP programs in place, because it also reflects bad on our suppliers. Okay, so taking corrective action, what if something goes wrong? Suppliers using a process not providing the same level of public health protection. This could be a problem. We have to issue a corrective action request. The supplier has to come back, this is what I did. I changed my program. I increased my swabbing frequency. I increased my, whatever it is program that I need to do. I see that it's okay. This corrective action makes sense, and we continue. I've just had an very interesting story. Container load of meat, actually. They're not even FSVP, but it was refused at the border. And they tested it, and it had listeria. So the importer had to do corrective action. They had to set, because they still need to import from them, so they had to ask the supplier what happened, do root cause analysis. Where did that come from? Why in the world didn't you get it? What happened? So they were going through the entire system of, with the lot number and what happened that day, and very interesting. One line that they had was down. They called in repair. The repair guys came in, fixed the line, and they were very behind with their production. Containers waiting, needs to be shipped to the United States. They right away restarted production without cleaning and sanitizing that line. What happened was the line was contaminated. Everything run on that second line was contaminated, came to the United States. It was a spot check. They don't check all the shipments. It was just a spot check, found the listeria, and had to refuse the entire shipment. So they had to reapprove their supplier, like, what are you gonna do to correct that? So they're doing after repair, they fix their maintenance program and clean up, and sanitizing after repairs and stuff like that. So all these corrective actions takes work. Here we go again, paperwork, documents. How many corrective actions do I have open? Who did I send a corrective action request to? It's too much to handle, and even corrective actions within our facility. Okay, we need that fixed, we need that repaired. We could do it on documents, we could do it on records, we could have one paper. But if I send a corrective action to one company, I send a corrective action to another company, I have corrective actions in my house. I don't know what's open, what was closed, what was taken care of. It takes a lot to be able to do that and to take care of that. So another thing, customer complaints leading back to supplier. If a customer calls in to complain, I found glass in the quinoa, which I had also a few weeks ago. Customer calls in, I found glass in the quinoa. The manufacturer that cooked the quinoa has a no glass policy. There's no glass in it. Went back to the supplier. What happened? In this lot number, there was glass. Do you have a glass policy? It was imported. How did this happen? How is it possible that you shouldn't even realize? So now there's no metal detection for it. It's very difficult to detect, but you should have seen that a bulb or something is broken, somewhere. So they had to do root cause analysis, see where it's coming from, see what, stop using the supplier. This is very serious because glass is damaging. There would be paper or, anything else, but glass is really, really bad. Adulterated food, misbranded food for allergen labeling, and we have to review the appropriate corrective action. Okay, so this is also up to you, what's appropriate. As he said, it's not defined, but we have to decide, is this corrective action appropriate enough for me to accept and for me to continue taking food from them and not hurt my customers? Okay, so this is what I have to decide. Will this affect the product that I'm making or I'm distributing? So the appropriate corrective action is depending on the circumstances. It might include discontinue of use until they corrected whatever it was that they needed to correct. Now, record keeping. Now we come to the major part of the entire FSMA regulations, and I'm sure each one of you could commiserate with what this takes from us and how much, some companies have hired people just for record keeping. Some companies have hired people just to do their supplier control. Some companies don't know what to do with themselves with the amount of records they need to keep. Now there are solutions, and we're going to present to you one right now. It's something that is really the way of the industry, because it's almost impossible to continue record keeping without having some kind of a system to help us. And technology is out there. I mean, it's available. The world is open for us. We just have to tap into it, find it, get it to do what it has to do for us, and just ease our situation. Now, if you hire somebody, it's a minimum of $35,000 a year. That would be, low paid. It could go up to $100,000 a year, for somebody to take care of your paperwork, of your record keeping system, of everything. If you get a software, I know in manufacturing, we figured out that any machine that could replace an employee pays itself. It pays off by itself within a year or two. If a machine is $70,000, you get rid of one employee, within 1 or 2 years, this machine is paid off. If it, produces, it's efficient. So that's why software, having a software which should help you with a record keeping, with a collection of data and everything, that is the way of the future. And I think that every business will at a certain point have to convert to digital record keeping, because it's just getting, too much. So we have maintaining records of these FSVP activities or any other supplier control activities or any FISMA activities. Obtaining all the required information for FSVP and keeping the necessary records are becoming increasingly difficult. So we have to reach out to suppliers again and again. I don't know if anybody of you had this experience. You have suppliers in China, you have suppliers in Mexico, you have suppliers in Brazil, you have suppliers all over the world. The CEOs are somewhere out partying. You could email 17 times until you get one response. Finally, you get one response. It's not sufficient. You need another one. So all of this back and forth. And where are you up to with this one? And where are you up to with this one? That's required. Getting the necessary documentation. Finally getting the spec sheets, the evaluation, the questionnaire, the hazard analysis, the HACCP and everything. Getting updated certificates. So you have their certificate, thank God. Well, it's expired in a year. Get that updated one. Following up on corrective actions, reassessments, documented availability for inspections. Now, okay, you're doing everything. Okay, you have boxes and boxes of people's hazard analysis printed out. You could have binders and bookcases. Now, somebody comes for an inspection, the FDA comes for an inspection, or if something happens and you have to review that file, go find it. So we need a way to easily search for the documents needed that should give us the information that we need at the time we need it. Okay, and then, so here we go. We know the problem and we need a solution. So I'm very, very happy to present to you that there is a solution out there, and we'll be hearing from James exactly what we could offer you to get this off the ground, up and running, have your system going for you, and just sleep peacefully at night.